Now the next big topic, just very briefly here, reforms. So what do we want from reforms? And I didn't even mention the Pittsburgh. You know, Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Summit 2009. I think it was last week that we had the fifth birthday, so fifth anniversary of that. So the Pittsburgh agenda was really the big push. As I said, there's some reform fatigue setting in, but the original idea is still there: make the financial sector safer and more resilient. At the same time, we need, and this is coming out more and more as the crisis is dragging on and the exit from the crisis is so difficult, we also need growth. So financial reforms cannot just stall growth. So we have to find the right balance. It's easier said than done. The devil is in the detail, but we need to take this into account. One of the issues in Europe that's a big topic is to foster capital market financing of the economy. As you know, the famous, and he was not the first who said it, but he made it famous, Draghi, when he said that the European economy is roughly 2/3 bank finance and only 1/3 capital market finance, the inverse of the US. So in Europe, we need to become less dependent on banks. We need more capital market financing, and we are supporting this push towards capital market financing, making also use of the capital, the savings that are out there. And it was shown in the first panel, the slides, what is out there. One of the big chunks of say idle capital, if you want, is what is out there to be invested is with institutional investors, and they are searching for good investments for yield. So we propose them. For example, infrastructure. We have a task force, G20 task force, and deals with long-term investment. Big part of that is infrastructure, but also SME finance. I can go into detail if there is time, but this is one of the reform issues that the OECD is dealing with. So, having said that, we also need to have a second look at the banks. And the OECD is not the place to discuss bank regulation. That is done in Basel in terms of the capital and liquidity regulations. But we have been jumping on board, so to say, in this effort that is underway at the FSB to look at structural bank reforms, meaning basically separation of banks business in one way or the other. And so this is one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit, except apart from the other things that are going on, but this is one of the issues that has maybe not been covered. That was one of the issues raised. So the structural reform should help to overcome the still lingering problem of too big to fail and interconnectedness. I have my own views on that. I think, and the OECD also has been warning that this is a problem that is still not solved. There is some optimism now in Europe with the banking, with the new mechanisms, the stability mechanism, resolution, and so on, reforms. This will help to deal with that problem, but we still think that the structural reforms are an important element. So what has happened there, we had, as I mentioned before, the Volcker rule in the US that was like throwing down the gauntlet, and we had Vickers in the UK. They were already a little bit different, and then the French came in, which is not even mentioned, the French, knowing that Liikanen would come. Liikanen was preparing its report at the Liikanen Commission. Then the French said, okay, well, we do something ourselves because we may not like that, so we move a little bit ahead and get some carve out there. So there was the French banking reform. Then Liikanen is still in the process of being worked out and regulated and put into more detailed regulation. And here we come in with this work on the that we are doing under the heading of the FSB to look at the inconsistencies of these reforms, cross-border inconsistencies, as we say. And it was very interesting for me to hear that, in fact, the FSB is not seen as so relevant and not moving ahead too strongly. And we had organized, we, the OECD and the IMF, as we are working for the FSB on this project, we had organized a roundtable with private sector participants and some regulators to get the market view and get market perspective about things that we wouldn't really know how to figure out on these inconsistencies. And the interesting thing is, and now I'm noting that the commission, we had invited the commissioners and they didn't come because they said we are so busy with Liikanen. Maybe now I know why. Also the US regulators didn't come because they do their own deal. So I don't know whether I should chide you or not, but that's the way it is. And maybe the FSB needs to also move ahead more resolutely. Yeah, as this is on the records, I won't say too much here, but one of the things is that also the members of the FSB did not really support this dialogue. They were coming to it, but they didn't want to have again comments from the private sector on the ongoing reforms, because there, and you mentioned it before, there's this kind of fear of lobbying. And I think we should overcome that fear and just take it as it is, and take the whining that is always going on in these meetings with a grain of salt, but still listen to what is behind this, and listen to what are the real problems. So I think this is really important. I may have overrun my time, but just this is kind of the memo slide. I'm not going into detail. Some of the outcomes of that roundtable, that will be reflected in a report that goes to the G20 leaders in November. But some of the issues raised, and I point out two here, is one of the regulatory uncertainty, and the regulatory uncertainty is kind of impeding banks from putting in place their business model that they eventually want to have, and should have, or have to have, according to regulations that we don't really know what they will look like. So it's very hard for banks, and they're kind of holding back lending, and it's very hard to adjust. At the same time, we have to see that we cannot do it too fast. It takes time. Reforms take time. We have been saying in previous on previous occasions that it's better to get it right than to do it fast. So these financial reforms is a 1 in 100-year chance, 1 in a century chance. I think we should try to get it right. It's a long process, and I've been watching that. If I had more time, there's another interesting slide. Davis Polk, a law firm, puts together the progress on Dodd-Frank, and that's very, very interesting to watch how many rules have been now put in place, and how much is open to do. And also they have data on the dialogues that have been going on with various stakeholders involved, and that just makes it very, very clear if you look at these numbers and the undone, unfinished business, how long that takes and how complicated it is. Well, Dodd-Frank was maybe more as like you needed to do something after the crisis, so you put together a book. That's what it should be, but it's in fact a rule book, a book to write the rules, how to write the rules, but the rules still have to be written. So that's a big problem. The other thing is and that was mentioned also, is the fragmentation, liquidity effects, liquidity retrenchment, the fragmentation that some of these reforms may introduce, the extraterritoriality of the Volcker rule, for example, was one of the things mentioned. But in general, these reforms in ring fencing capital and liquidity would create a fragmentation, and that is something that should concern us also in terms of growth, in terms of capital flows. At the OECD, we have the codes, what we call the codes in short, is the codes of liberalization of capital movements and invisible transactions. And these codes should guarantee a free flow of capital, open capital markets. But there are carve-outs, like for everything, all these rules, as under WTO and others, for financial stability. But then one thing we will do in the next round of this FSV project is to look at in how far these any carve-outs there are, in how far they comply with the codes, and in how far there should be changes that we would like to suggest to change the rules so that we can keep capital markets open, which is very important for growth and for a stable and resilient global economy. And I leave it there. I guess we have many open questions, and thank you very much.